Hello and welcome back to The Marketing Hustle. If it's your first time here, I'm your host, Lottie Unwin. If you love hearing unfiltered stories from bold brands on how they do their marketing and survive as founders, you're in the right place. Today, I chatted to Marisa Poster, co-founder of Perfected. Perfected sell Matcha energy. They're backed by Steven Bartlett and they were recent sponsors of Russ Cook, the first person to run the length of Africa. We talked about how she manages her ADHD, how to get the most out of Dragon's Den, and getting 1 million impressions on LinkedIn every week. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. This episode is brought to you by Be a Bear. Be a Bear specialise in growing audiences. They believe that the best way to build any business is with an engaged and excited audience. And over the past 6 years, they've worked on strategies to support local startups through to global super brands. This year, they've delivered projects for Molton Brown, Red Bull, MTV and Channel 5, to name a few, and they're currently working with a couple of brands from the Upworld community to help build their market awareness. Go and check them out. For now, back to the show. 5 days a week,
yes,
in an office.
Correct.
You think this is your competitive advantage? And this is fun because I run a fully remote, we are like opposite, right? I run a fully remote business. My team are like, I have a team member in Mozambique, I have a team member in Vancouver.
What?
I have a team member who's like currently in the Scottish Highlands. Like, I'm the opposite.
So not only are you remote, but you're also on different time zones.
Yes.
That is so hard. Like when I'm in America, because I go home frequently, I find it so difficult to communicate with the team because of the time difference. How do you do that? It's very different depending on the time zone. Fine.
So anything under 4 hours, I don't think is a problem.
No.
Because I actually think it's an advantage. I think it's the best productivity hack in the world. And whenever I work from a different time zone, genuinely my output doubles because I just remove, like I do deep work like I never do in the UK.
Fair enough.
So like my ability to think and to drive strategic change is just day and night from what's happening in London when I'm like bombarded with comms. Why do you think 5 days a week is your competitive advantage?
I think when you're a startup, things move so quickly. Just looking at the pace at which we've grown over the past almost 3 years is remarkable. And I really think we've been able to do that because of the speed and ease of communication by us all being together in person. I even find it when I am traveling, I find not only the time difference difficult, but just getting in touch with people. I have ADHD, so I like to put on Do Not Disturb on my laptop and my phone because I get really triggered by notifications popping up all day. So I'm really intentional about when I check those notifications and I set times for myself. But if there is something more urgent that needs my input, instead of being pinged a million times on Teams or WhatsApp or getting phone calls and I'm not getting any of them because I have my Do Not Disturb on, someone can just come over and tap me. And so for me, it's just much easier. I also think we've been able to create a culture that is really fun and we build fun into the schedule. But I think at the end of the day, almost selfishly, we have created a team that we really like and like to be with and enjoy not only like working hard with, but also having fun with. And I think that it just makes for a more passionate and hardworking team, really, because everyone is motivated by each other. They're all feeding on each other's energy. And because we're an energy brand, it's great because we have a lot of energy in the office. And everyone, of course, is different. Like some people are a bit more introverted over extroverted, but it all kind of balances out. And it just leads to a really great atmosphere in the office.
It's so unusual now.
It is very unusual. It puts people off for sure. But I also think that, and it's funny because we actually spoke with Steven about this quite a bit because they also, up until recently, had a 5-day-a-week in the office policy. They've now switched to 4, and Fridays are optional. And Steven said that like 80% of the team still comes in on Fridays because they've created an office environment where people want to be around each other and they like to have that social element. But we spoke with him about it because we almost also use it as a way of filtering candidates because we do feel that if you are willing to work in person, which is more effort. It really is, because you do have to commute and get up and just like, get dressed.
Yeah,
and
put clothes on, yeah.
We feel like it's a way of filtering people who are actually really passionate about joining the team and our mission.
Wow. How else does your ADHD affect life as a founder?
So many ways. It's a blessing and a curse because I am definitely really creative, but I also struggle to organize my thoughts, communicate them in a way that other people can understand. I find that for me, articulating certain ideas that I've come up with can be pretty difficult, and I don't necessarily translate it well. I think one area that has been particularly helpful for me is I have learned essentially every skill that you'd need to have in marketing generally. So I'm a self-taught graphic designer. I'm a self-taught videographer, editor, photographer. I know CapCut, Adobe Premiere Pro, Illustrator, Photoshop, all the apps, all the software. And that actually makes my life easier as a manager now because I'm able to understand the language almost. And I think that if you're someone managing a creative process, and let's say, for instance, you have input on video cuts and transitions, but you've never had actual hands-on experience with videography or editing before, I think it would be much harder to articulate what you're looking for. And as someone who struggles already to translate that, it is definitely easier knowing the actual skills. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. Again, I am so different. It's really interesting. So I manage lots of people who have technical skills that I don't have because I think I'm very much like big picture and vision. And I'd say my attention to detail is quite poor to everything I do. And like you say, I really see that as a strength and weakness. I'm very aware of how it trips me up in situations where like I don't have the hunger to learn something for the sake of learning it. And I don't like that about myself. And yet I really see the strength in not going down rabbit holes. So it's just fascinating how we have such different perspectives.
I think that I'm with you in that feeling about certain topics. Like, for instance, I think one area that I have not spent much time in is, for instance, learning about like meta ads and paid ads generally. And that has been more of a time constraint more than anything.
Okay. So it's like your interest, if you're lit up by something, you'll follow it.
Yeah. But I also think I learned all of those skills out of necessity. So when we first started, we looked at using agencies and everything was just so expensive.
Yeah, so you just have to.
And we just had to. And I spent every Saturday, for instance, trying different recipe videos and creating content and creating assets on Illustrator. I designed all of our packaging. So everything that you see on shelf for Perfect Head is designed by me. Now we actually have a graphic designer, Lydia, who's so talented and she makes all the changes, but that was really out of necessity.
Yeah.
I think that what you were saying, where you are leading more of the vision and getting less into the weeds of things, is actually better because you have more time to work on the business as opposed to in.
That's the theory, right?
Yes, but I do think that also has its advantage because exactly like what you said, you're not wasting time down a rabbit hole. Whereas sometimes, one could say that it was a big waste of time for me to design our website and teach myself Figma. I would agree in some way that maybe because it's opportunity cost, right? Yes. Like where is your time best spent really? Like time is the only non-replenishable resource. So it's
love
just
that.
it is. So it's very wise to just choose where you put your time chips. I would now say that my time is best spent in leading vision as well. But do I like, having an hour to edit a recipe video? Yeah, sure. I do. I enjoy it. I think it's really fun. I find flow in those apps, weirdly. And it just allows me to be creative. But I do think my time is now better spent leading strategy. We're now at a point in the business where it feels like we have the headspace to be less reactive and more intentional with planning. And actually, the partners that we work with, like Tesco, Waitrose, Holland & Barrett, they're not working on a week-to-week schedule. They're working quarters out or half a year out. I was shocked when I learned that buyers select Christmas products in June. I was like, what? That makes no sense. Like, what do you mean, not November? And so for us, we now are of the size where we actually have to get our shit together.
Yes.
And we can't afford to be working on a day-by-day schedule. We have to be planned and thoughtful. So now I have stepped into more of a strategic role, but I still do enjoy getting my hands dirty.
Yeah, we're allowed some tasks that we just love.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I said yesterday, I told our head of e-commerce, I was like, do you mind if I take the design for our powder pouch email? And she was like, of course, you do your thing. And I was like, great. Okay. I just need an hour to just get
I just need a little treat this afternoon.
Exactly. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I'm the same with copywriting.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll make a tea and I'll write my emails and it'll be so nice.
Exactly.
Time is the only non-replenishable resource. And yet, we can work longer hours always. There is a point where there are no hours left. But I think some of the challenge for founders is how many of those hours you choose to work. How have you found managing your own energy and looking after yourself in this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really difficult. I think that early on in the journey, you are so fired up by, it's just all new, right? It's the novelty of the experience. It's every day you're learning something new. Every day you're meeting new people and just having loads of different experiences. And especially for someone like me who had never previously worked in food and beverage or marketing, I'm a first-time founder, so everything was new. And I think it was just the adrenaline and excitement of it all, and bringing a product that I personally needed to market and build a brand around it. Everything was just so exciting that I genuinely worked all day, every day, until 11 p.m. every weekend, no days off, for I think a year and a half straight. It was like that. Barely any vacation, maybe only a few days during Christmas. And because it was just so exciting. And I love it. I still love it. But I think that genuinely, you really do burn out though. I mean, I think it's just not sustainable. And people would tell me that and I'd be like, yeah. And I'll save that for later, right? And you just burn out so quickly. And then there was a point when I realized that the time that I was putting in was not correlated to the efficiency or my productivity. Yes. And I'd sometimes sit at my computer screen and just stare at it for an hour, and time would pass and I'd be like, what did I just do? And it was when I was losing track of time so quickly and realizing I wasn't accomplishing anything that I was like, no, this needs to change. So I'm now a bit more protective over my time, and I build in time for myself. I really rely on my calendar to set aside time where, for instance, I work from a coffee shop for an hour in the morning because I need that focus time, kind of what you were saying about how when you're working on a different time zone, you can do all that deep work because no one can reach you. I actually do that very intentionally, several times a week, and not put myself in a different time zone, but just in a different place. And I find that breaking up the environment is really helpful for me, but also just being able to like get that headspace. Exercise I use as a tool. I've started to also use sound frequencies. I know that sounds very strange, but I've learned about them recently. It's very like woo-woo, but I need to learn more about the science behind it, but I use an app called Soak. It's Soaak, and I listen to it on repeat for most of the day with my noise canceling headphones. It's amazing.
Wow.
I really highly recommend, and I just feel very zoned into what I'm doing, just so focused. Obviously matcha helps, of course. I don't drink coffee or other caffeine, but I think that, you know, just building in the time for you is so important, because you can't run on adrenaline and excitement for years and years and years.
Yeah.
I remember reading something very early on about how as a founder, you never think you can lose motivation to work on your business, because you have founded the idea. You have built the team. You're the reason that this exists, right? So surely, how could you ever lose motivation to work on it? And I was finding myself so burnt out that I genuinely was like, I can't do this anymore. And those are the inflection points when you know you need to build a team around you. You have to look for mentors. You need to find, you know, resource. So I've worked with coaches. You know, we have people in the industry that we can lean on. We're really lucky to have Steven Bartlett as an advisor and investor, because we can, you know, leverage him and his team to lean on for advice and support. So yeah, I think that, yes. So to take it back to what you were asking, you can work 24 hours a day if you want, right? But at the end of the day, like, if you're not investing time into yourself, then you won't have the energy or the bandwidth to work on your business.
The way you describe that early feeling that you think time is someone else's problem resonates to me so much. You're like, other people run out of time, I don't.
Exactly.
Like, I can work forever.
Exactly.
And then 3 months later, you're like, I cannot work forever.
100%. And I also think, I mean, I don't know how hormones play into it, but I do think as women, because I frequently find myself comparing myself, because I have two co-founders who are men, and I believe, of course, in equality, but I do think that hormones affect us differently. And of course, you know, your time of the month like might play into your level of energy and focus. And I just sometimes am like, oh, why are they able to just go, go, go? And I feel like they never have like peaks or troughs in energy, unrelated to caffeine. And I'm like, oh, I need to remind myself that like my body is different. It's not just my mind at play here, you know? So I have tried to be more gentle and kind to myself. And I think that, you know, like many people, I suffer with perfectionism, and I always strive to do the right thing and do it to, you know, 1,000% of my energy and effort. And sometimes I just have to accept that 80% is good enough for today, Marissa, and just pat myself on the back that I was able to get through it. Because I think that a lot of the time, especially with perfectionists, your self-talk can be quite negative, because you're like, oh, that wasn't good enough. I could have done so much better. And I'm really trying to reframe. You know, I'm sure that the perfectionist in me, even after this conversation with you, it's just a conversation. There's no pressure. Like, this is very casual, a lovely environment. I love your house. But there should be no... I mean, of course, yes, there's a level of expectation that I hold myself to, but like afterwards, I'm sure there could be little things where I criticize myself. Oh, Marissa, you could have said that so much more succinctly, or that message could have been so much stronger. And instead, I'm just trying to focus on the positives. You did that really well. This went right. So one last thing, because I'm going on a tangent. One thing I'm trying to do now very intentionally is at the end of the day, just writing 3 really great things that I did. And that seems a bit, I think that it's a healthy level of narcissism to say I was responsible for doing XYZ today that led to X, and I'm proud of myself. I really think everyone needs to take stock in that, because even if you are, it doesn't matter if you're a founder or a content manager or whatever role you are in your business, you are responsible for driving something and for doing something right, whether it's in your professional or your personal life. Let's say you called a friend and you were a shoulder to cry on. That's great. You can be that resource to your friend. Or you conceptualized this incredible ad campaign. Great. That was your brainchild, So I think everyone just needs to take stock a bit more in their accomplishments.
I wonder if self-talk is gendered.
Absolutely.
I don't know this because I only live in a woman's head. But I know that the voice in my head is quite horrific. And I know that when I try and explain this to my partner, for example, he kind of looks at me like I'm insane, because I think that's actually the only logical response is like, you say those things to yourself. So I'm really interested to hear another woman say it's really bad for me too. It's not just me. Maybe it's not just me. Maybe it's our shared issue. Do you agree that self-talk is a woman's thing, and how do you manage it?
I obviously haven't, dived, whatever. I don't know what the proper tense of that is. I haven't looked into the research as much as I probably should, because I find it very intriguing. But I do generally think that women tend to put more pressure on themselves. I just think if you look historically, women have been responsible for child rearing, for the emotional burden of their spouses and their children. Like, just looking at typical gender norms. I remember learning in sociology in college that it's called, what was it called? I'm going to forget the name of it. But it's like the unspoken, the second shift. So even though that, women's rights and equality in the workplace has made so much, has made so many advancements, like in the last, 4 or 5 decades, we still bear an uneven burden to relationships, I believe. And I think that makes us feel inferior in many ways. So let me just expand on that for a second. What I mean by that is, take a man, for instance, who is working on his business, right? And I see this with Levi and Teddy. The expectation that is on them from friends, from fellow male friends, I think is much lower. Like, I look at Levi and Teddy, and not trying to call them out, but they don't speak to their friends as frequently as I try to. And I don't believe they're held to the same level of expectation that we are as more empathetic and emotional beings. Does that make sense? Let me try to rephrase that a little bit.
It definitely makes sense. But I think they have I think the financial pressure and the language that some men in my life, like the pressure that some men in my life feel around status and ability to provide, is a whole other ballgame.
Interesting.
So it's like, I'm not sure that anyone's winning in this.
That is true, but I don't know, and I can only speak to personal experience, so that's why I'm drawing on comparisons with Levi and Teddy, but I feel that personal financial pressure as well. Like, very much, it is top of mind. Like, whilst I'm married, I feel like I have pressure to be the breadwinner in my relationship, even though my spouse is my co-founder. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I still feel that burden of of feeling like the financial pressure. I don't know. I think really what it comes down to is just that historically women have been conditioned to be more emotional beings and to be more in touch with their sensitive side. And so as a result, we are sensitive. We're maybe a bit more likely to be hypersensitive to the people around us, the circumstances we're in. I think so frequently about like the well-being of our team. I know that seems really strange. I mean, I don't think it is strange. I would hope that most business owners think about their team and their health and how they're doing. But, you know, something that I do frequently, and it's almost like instinctive, I buy snacks for the team just to have in the office. And I don't think Levi or Teddy have ever once thought about. Do you know what I mean? But it's like an added layer of maybe like care and nurturing that men haven't necessarily been raised to provide. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about the financial burden. And I do see it with other women who maybe aren't business owners and have chosen a different path for their lives, which is totally fine. I think everyone should do what they're comfortable with and happy to do. But I don't know. I think it is harder for women. Because I certainly deal with a lot of negative self-talk, and nothing I ever do feels good enough. Whereas men can kind of just move on. I don't know. Could also just be the fact that I'm an only child and I never had like siblings to fight with and then get over. Like one very new thing for me when I started working with Teddy, who is my brother-in-law, was we would fight, go to sleep, and then we'd wake up in the morning and he was fine. Like nothing happened. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like we just fought last night. He's like, I don't care. And I'm like, no, but I do. It's unresolved. I'm like, we need to resolve this. He's like, Marisa, just move on. He's like, we don't resolve. We work forward. And I'm like, what? We need to talk about it. He's like, no, we don't. And I'm like, okay, what? So strange. But yeah, it's basically, that's my thing.
How's the journey with Steven been?
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Is he actively involved?
Yes, very. I don't know. It's been a long journey, hasn't it? Because we were asked to go on Dragon's Den in June of 2022. So it's been over 2 years now. And I remember when we went to Manchester, I said to Teddy, I was like, you're about to meet your idol. Because Teddy was obsessed with Diary of a CEO and he loved Steven. And it was just very aspirational, of course. And meeting him in person for the first time on the Den was so nerve-wracking, but also very cool because he was just a very down-to-earth guy on the show. And then obviously we agreed a deal. And funny enough, we didn't have communication with him for months afterwards. Everything was through his team and his brother who manages his investments. And it wasn't until the show aired in March of 2023 that we then started speaking to him every day. Like we WhatsApp Steven every single day. We have a group chat. It is constantly active. He's always sending us things, ideas, updates from his life and his businesses. We're constantly updating him and his team about our progress. And I would say 2 months after our episode aired, he approached us to make a follow-on investment in the business with a large cash contribution and a promotional side to the deal. And it took a year to negotiate. So from May 2023 to May 2024, we were negotiating a deal and eventually ended with something that we were really happy with. And now we're the new sponsors to Diary of a CEO, which has been incredible. The latest episode that our ad read was on was with Andrew Huberman, which was, I think, one of his most successful podcasts to date, and still climbing. So it's been a really, really interesting, wild ride, but he's great. I think that it's something we're seeing now with him, and it's quite unfortunate. They say that in Australia it's quite common. It's called like tall poppy syndrome. Do you know it?
No.
When you reach a certain level of success, people want to tear you down. And I think he had some negative press recently around the ASA and Zoe and Huel, and people personally have been telling me, you know, just negative opinions that they hold of him. And I think it's so unfortunate and unfair because he is a self-made man, you know, and it's been his will and drive and determination that has gotten him to the place that he's at. And he has so much wisdom to share with the world. And I actually think what he's doing with his career is such a selfless endeavor because he's trying to share different perspectives, you know, expert opinions that can, one, lead to healthy debate, but two, also allow people worldwide to educate themselves on various topics from business to health. And I think that is a force of good. So it bothers me when people speak negatively about him. And everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, but I feel quite almost like protective over him because I think what he is doing is so great. So we're very lucky to work with someone like him.
Do you think you were lucky? Lucky is an interesting word. Were you lucky in your experience of Dragon's Den and what happened next, or did you play it right?
I like that question. I think that it's a mix of both, and I think there is luck in everything. I am not a religious person at all, but I do believe in fate and timing. And I think that we were in the right time and place. Like, I think about the trajectory of my life, and genuinely, my life would probably look so much different. And I'm sure so many people could say this, but if it weren't for COVID, because COVID was the reason why I moved to the UK. And from America. So I was previously working in real estate finance. And I was just, you know, on the grind. I was on the hamster wheel. And sometimes when you're in that corporate lifestyle, you're working so monotonously that you kind of just don't stop to think about what you're doing and how your time is being spent. And COVID was such a great reset because it allowed me the headspace away from the office to really think about where my life was going and what I wanted it to look like. I wasn't feeling satisfied or fulfilled in my job, although I was enjoying it and I was learning a ton. I just felt like the 16-hour work days weren't going to lead me to make a real difference in the world working for a large real estate institution. So I was also in a long distance relationship, and Levi, my partner, was in London. New York had kind of gone to shit because of all the restrictions and the crime. So I was like, you know what? Let's move to London and totally start a new life. And I think it really was a lot in the timing of things because around then, so it was 2020, Matcha was not nearly as, you know, popular or widespread as it is now. I mean, in fact, it's so funny looking at the messages that we got back then because people were like, it's so niche, it's never going to take off. Why should our cafe stock it? Now we're speaking to the UK's largest cafe chains to launch Matcha. Like, we just launched with M&S cafes, branded. We're launching with Tesco cafes. I mean, that's Tesco, you know, like matcha in Tesco. What the hell? You would never think that was possible 4 years ago. And I think it really was timing that allowed us to get to the right place at the right time because we were offering a product that was, you know, I mean, it's been around for 800 years, and its effects have been studied, and anecdotally, so many people can speak to their benefits. But no one had ever done it particularly well. This isn't to make a dig at the brands that had preceded us trying to make matcha big, but I don't think they approached it in the right way. Because in 2017, 2018, obviously I wasn't living here, but we did a lot of research and into like the history of the matcha market in the UK, and brands never marketed the right product attribute about matcha, in my opinion. I think that the brands that preceded us were leaning heavily on the antioxidant benefits of matcha, and they're abundant, that's for sure. But if you really look to the need state that someone would be reaching for a matcha in, for me, and I thought about the reason why I drink it, it's for the energy and the type of energy. It's not for the antioxidants per se. I mean, that is like an additional benefit, which is great, but it's really all about, the energy. And if you look at the stats that say more than 70% of the UK report feeling tired for more than half the day, coffee and caffeine is like the number one drug consumed worldwide. Surely this is the benefit that you should be shouting about as opposed to the others. So I think that leading with energy was the right approach. Creating a product that was aligned with changing, consumer values in health and multiple functionalities within a food and beverage product. So that's all for me to say. Right time, right product, right place in the UK where matcha wasn't as widespread as it was in the US. And just getting lucky with the producers reaching out to us. And then I do think we were really intentional with how we leveraged the kind of, publicity from the show. I think we went about it in the right way. We knew that those 15 minutes of television were the most important, 15 minutes of our lives and of our careers, because it was effectively an advertisement for the business to the world. And we also understood the purpose of the show was to make good TV. So yeah, your purpose is to sell your business. But if you think about the BBC and the entire team behind the show, the producers are tasked with making it a good show. Like they care about views.
They don't care about Matcha.
No, they don't care about Matcha. They don't care about Perfect Tie. They don't care about Marisa. They don't care about Teddy. They care about views. And so what could we do that would insert humor and insert education? And, that's why we made a provocative joke about Steven looking young, because we knew it would rile up the dragons and cause some like discourse between them.
So it was all planned.
Yeah. Because we were like, we want to be a little bit provocative. We didn't want to take too many risks, but we knew that picking fun at one of them in like a kind and harmless way would cause some sort of funny, conversation to ensue. So, Teddy made a lot of jokes. But ultimately we cared about coming across really polished, because we knew that optically walking away with 5 offers would look better than anything for us. And that's also why we put such a low valuation on the business, because you see sometimes people go in there and they value their business at like, I don't fucking know, like some really unreasonable number. And they spend the entire session just talking about how it's an unfair valuation. Like Tuka's like, no, I disagree with your valuation. Like, absolutely not. And it becomes less about your business and more about the valuation. We were just like, we don't want to cause any sort of ruffles around that. We want to focus on the business and what really matters. And it couldn't have gone better. So we got very lucky. And off the back of that, we leveraged that nationwide exposure on TV to turn around to Tesco and say, we're going to have, 7 million eyeballs on our brand. We need a place to send people to buy it. So it worked in our favor.
What's been the secret to your marketing success since then?
I think that the secret has been taking bold risks. And I have a few examples of that. I think that one bold risk that we took earlier days, almost like immediately preceding Dragon's Den, was working with Russ Cook, the hardest geezer. And we were introduced to him when he had 30,000 followers on Instagram. And this guy was running the length of Africa, and he had just started. And we were like, this is crazy. Personally, I was like, I'm not a runner, and I don't know how this is humanly possible. Like, I just don't see how he can make it. And, forget about health challenges, but also traveling through really dangerous countries that, frequently have hostage crises and, and he eventually was abducted, actually. So this was a really bold bet early on to sponsor Project Africa. And it was the largest marketing investment to date that we would have ever made. And it was a lot of money. So we were just like, but actually we it only took about a few hours really for me to get around to thinking it was a good idea, because I did think, well, it could go wrong. You think about all the things that could go wrong, but it also could go phenomenally well. And he could blow up and be like the next big thing in sports and culture. And he was. Yeah. He grew to like over 1 million followers at the end of the trip. We sent the guys out to Africa 3 times to run with him. We got incredible content. We helped amplify his voice and his message and his team. We were able to work with such incredible people along the way. And I just think it was such a risk and a bold bet, but it really did pay off. I think just like leaning into our gut feel that things would work. Another bold bet that it's a bit different because it's less of like a marketing activity, but when we were approached by Max Jones, who is incredible. He's one of our sales execs. And he approached us right after he graduated high school and was like, I don't want to go to college. I love your brand. I love how you stand for, something more than just your products, and are so welcoming to neurodiversity. And he has dyslexia and ADHD. And we were just like, we were unsure about bringing someone on who was, unskilled, also young, very young, obviously. And it was a risk because it may not have worked out, and maybe we spent all this time training someone who wasn't going to be able to live up to expectation within that role. And that was one of the best bets that we could have ever made, because one, Max is, just such a valued team member. Like, he brings such great energy, but he also runs a massive P&L now. He also is great for business development because he has been posting on LinkedIn every single day for almost a year now. He was given a challenge by Steven Bartlett that if he posted every day for a year, he would have a 2-week all expenses paid trip to Los Angeles with Steven and his team. And it's been one of the most effective ways of getting new business, because we get emails from people all the time, distributors, other partners, retailers, small cafes, whatever, whoever it is. And they're like, we saw Max on LinkedIn, like, love what you're doing, love what he's doing. Can we work together? So, you know, that was, at the time, it seemed like a risk to bring someone on who was so inexperienced, but it's turned out to contributed so much to our team in so many ways.
That's amazing, that challenge.
It's a really fun one.
That's so fun. Is he on his way to LA?
He'll be done in November.
So exciting.
He's 2 months out. It's pretty sick. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
Are there big bets you've taken that haven't worked?
It's a good question. I tried to think about this for a little while. Before meeting with you. And I really couldn't think of many. And I know that sounds a little strange.
Is that because there might be something in that. Is that because things that don't work out are actually never that big a deal? So it's like you didn't know, you could have not replied to that Russ Cook email. And someone else might have watched him blow up, but you might not even remember that you had the moment that you could have done it. It's like we don't know the avenues we don't explore.
Yeah, that's true.
So I wonder if some of it's that, like things you can't see.
I think it's things we can't see, but also things that have not had a material impact on the business.
Yeah.
So for instance, actually one bet that came to mind was we had offered a lady a role in social media as an internship to see if she would be a good fit. And it was an internship because we had some reservations about whether or not it would work out between us, and it didn't work out. And that was okay. She was happy parting ways, and we were happy to part with her, and it was fine. We got learnings from it, but it had no material impact on the business. So I think that, you know, it's not like we've ever spent $100K on above the line campaign and saw no uplift as a result. Like everything that we have done, I think, if it hasn't had as big of an impact, it's been good learning. And I would say nothing's been that, it hasn't had much of an effect on the business. But I also think that we try to approach things with gut feel, but also very intelligently. Like we try to view things as like an intellectual exercise. We never do marketing activities just because other brands are doing it for the sake of it. Like, we're in almost, I think, 10,000 doors right now. And that's just sites alone. That's not even just including points of sale. And we, as a brand of like our size and distribution, we could do an above the line campaign like very easily. It would probably be an interesting exercise to do like a tube campaign, right? And we've spoken to a lot of agencies about it, but we're like, why? Like, okay, we'll measure how many impressions can that get us? What do we think that the uplift would be? Okay, could we get that many impressions by doing something else? Like, LinkedIn alone, combined between just Teddy Levi and myself, we'll get like 1 million views a week. So we're like, how does that spend? And that's free, right? So we're like, we try to always be really intelligent about spend and the most effective ways of using it. Like, I don't know, it just feels like, yes, you could do a tube campaign, but like, are you only doing it because every other food and beverage brand is doing it and you feel like you have to? Or is there a more cost-effective and smarter way to spend your money,
Tell me about how you use LinkedIn.
I have been really bad recently, and I am trying to hold myself accountable more, but I was on a very good streak, And I find that when like shit hits the fan, it's like the first thing that goes for me, which is really bad, and actually why we're now changing team structure a little bit so I can prioritize it more. So we've actually just hired a head of marketing and bringing her on from Windmill Organics. And she's incredible. I'm very excited. She's actually coming into the office later today. But that will alleviate like a lot of my day-to-day work, and will allow me to focus a bit more on personal brand and being like the face of the brand. LinkedIn has been amazing because we try to use it as a platform to build celebrity status. So the way that we view celebrity as a brand is like, brands can leverage celebrity in 3 ways. One, you can be a celebrity and start a brand, like Kim Kardashian and Skims, right? You can be a celebrity and be an ambassador for a brand, like Rihanna and Louis Vuitton. Or you can create celebrity out of the brand and do that with the team and the founders. And now we're actually seeing EGC, employee generated content, as being like a really, compelling new creative avenue for brands. And I think that's just something that we've done pretty organically from early on. Out of necessity, I would make Teddy star in our Christmas campaigns in like underwear and like a reindeer headband the first year that we launched, because we had no budget for models. Like we were our only models to kind of like showcase the product and the brand. And obviously then going on Dragon's Den helped kind of give us this level of legitimacy, but also just speaking to our everyday experiences and being super honest about learnings. And I think that, more recently, I haven't been posting as much of this type of content, but I think content that is providing value or lessons in some way that, brings food for thought, as opposed to just using LinkedIn as a platform to share wins and being braggadocious. So we look at it as a really effective marketing channel. Also because most of our, customer base are working professionals. That's where a lot of working professionals go, right? And so it's good that they're seeing our content organically. But also, funny enough, we used LinkedIn, and I haven't really shared this story much, but we used LinkedIn really early on to help win some of our biggest contracts. At first. Facebook, the Facebook offices, now Meta, across the UK and Ireland were one of our biggest contracts, one of our biggest wins early on. And the way that we got that was, we tried the route of emailing the catering managers or, going direct to like a breaks, and they didn't know who we were. So that was never going to work. So instead, what we thought to do was, okay, what if we connect with just regular Facebook employees, like a mid-level manager or something, and connect with them, offer to send them free product, and say, we hope you enjoy the drinks. Why don't you give them a try at work? They should help, boost productivity and focus and give you energy. And if you like them, let us know. And they'd come back, and these people aren't influencers. They're just, employees. And so they'd be confused, but also very grateful that they were getting free product. And they would come back and be so, thank you. That was so kind. I loved them, blah, blah, blah. And we would just have a very simple ask and say, if you really liked them, would you mind just telling your catering manager to stock them? And eventually we built enough of a groundswell, and we had enough employees asking the catering manager that the catering managers were then coming to us and being like, why am I hearing from every person on the floor that they want Perfect 10 in our fridges? So it was just a different way of going about it, but one that I think it was a smart kind of tactic, because it's not the most conventional route to market.
So clever. You have a full-time videographer.
Yes.
Is that right? I'm obsessed with this. I'm so jealous. What inspired that decision, and what do they do all day?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it has been, it's been one of the best investments that we have could have made as a business. I think for us, and if you look at companies like Red Bull, they're not a media company. I mean, they're not sorry, I butchered that again. Let me start again. They're not a beverage brand. They're a media company. And we also wanted to take that kind of approach early on. So from the very beginning, it was just like Teddy and I posting on stories on Instagram. And we tried to record all the behind the scenes of what it was like to be building our brand. And we took a lot of inspiration from a company in the States called Midday Squares. They actually originated in Canada and they're freaking delicious. Love them, love the founders. But they were probably one of the first brands to really put like the brand building story out there on all forms of social media. And we saw how well that worked from all angles, because not only did customers want to be part of the journey to support them, but then buyers at retailers wanted to be part of the journey as well because they felt so bought into it. So we originally brought Mark on because we wanted to formalize a way of capturing behind the scenes without me just being on my phone the entire time. And we also wanted it to be like of a higher quality. And he is such a skilled editor as well. And initially we wanted him to focus primarily on vlogs, but then because we lacked resource in more like social media content and ads, he's helped a lot there. But we have recorded everything behind the scenes. So everything from private meetings with Steven to prospective investor meetings to meetings with buyers. And what we found was that if you walk into a grocer and it's a meeting about listing your products, if you bring a videographer, they're more inclined to say yes.
Yeah, you look legit.
Yeah, but also because they don't want to be seen as that person that said no. If we are publicizing this footage, and they want to be part of the journey of growing the brand. And it sounds really, it does sound a bit like self-obsessed, but I think that, I don't know if you watch like the Kanye West documentary, and I know he's gone off the rails recently and I'm not the biggest fan of his anymore, but it's kind of sad to see his downfall. But I think what we saw in his documentary was he had the foresight when he was a nobody to have a guy following him around with a video camera because he knew he was going to make it. And 20 years later, you have this rich footage of his rise to stardom. And now in retrospect, you could be like, oh, he's a genius. He knew he was going to be famous. But I think it's also that level of self-belief and like putting your money where your mouth is, because we're documenting the whole journey because we know it's going to be a business case study one day. We know it. And what better way to study it than have the actual footage of it being built in real time, And I know that sounds a bit conceited, but I think it's more delusion and confidence than it is narcissism.
I
Does that
think
make
it
sense?
sounds like we talked earlier about like affirmations. I think it's like affirmations on steroids.
100%. And I think affirmations can be quite woo-woo, but I will always go back to them and say, I think it is a way of physically manifesting what you want to, see in the world. And actually it's been really helpful because we were approached by a production company who is finalizing a pilot right now for a docuseries about our business and our growth. And it's so amazing to me because it's like, now we're actually putting out long form or longer form vlogs on YouTube. And I think the 4th one is being released tomorrow. And it's been so fun for me as well because I'm working really closely with Mark on editing them. And looking back just from like a year and a half ago, I'm so nostalgic. I'm like, oh, like we were so cute and little back then.
A year ago.
No idea. Yeah, a year ago. And we had no idea what we were talking about. Like even looking at videos of of our head of sales, Shawnee, Teddy, and myself, like speaking in our old office, and we had no idea what we were talking about. We were talking about like CAC, right? Like, and I was like, we don't have a CAC, and I'm like, what am I saying? Like, and it's kind of embarrassing, but it's also really sweet because you can also see your personal and professional evolution. But yeah, I think you're right. It's a way of manifesting and putting the journey out there and getting people to be part of it.
All right, I've got one final question for you.
Yes.
What is one thing that someone listening to this can help you with?
Ooh, okay. Can it be 2 things?
Yeah.
Okay.
Deal.
1, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me what I could have done better during this podcast.
Oh gosh, and me too.
And actually, because I have notes, but I'd love to also get feedback. Constructive, please don't like troll me. And then also, if you could, reach out, and if you know anyone looking for a role in social media marketing.
Done.
But we'll also chat about that.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be loads of people. What are you looking for?
We're looking for someone who can manage the full spectrum of the content creation and social media management process with a lot of support, that is to say, because we have a ton of internal resources, from graphic design to obviously Mark, who's our in-house content producer, to marketing manager, and loads of willing participants who would love to take part in content. So there's never like a lack of people willing to participate. So, and a very hands-on co-founder.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you loved the episode, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It really helps us grow and get more brilliant guests on the show. If you want to hear more real-life insights from the life of a founder in startup marketing, do give me a follow on LinkedIn. I would love to connect. That's a wrap for next time, but do remember that you can always get in touch and let me know who I should interview next.